What's up, everybody? It's Big Bryan here, 8747 Productions. We're hanging out with Rich Ward of the band Fozzy, and you guys probably remember Rich from the good old band that stuck Mojo. Done some work with the Adrenaline Mob. You got your own thing, the Duke, right?
Yeah.
The Duke of Metal. Pretty cool moniker right there. You do most of the work right up until the mastering, and then you send it off to a mastering engineer. How do you pick your mastering engineer, and how important is your relationship with that guy?
Well, the guy that we use is a guy named Glenn Schick, out of Atlanta. And Glenn has done a bunch of big records. But the reason I use Glenn is because I have a good relationship with Glenn. This business is about relationships. If you decide to send your stuff to New York or LA to one of these big mastering houses and you pay $5,000 or $10,000 or $3,500 or whatever you negotiated for your mastering fee or more, the big guys send you what they send you. That's it. That they do what they do. I have found a guy that I can sit in a room with and say, can we try this? And he can make suggestions and he can say, hey, I really think the low mids are a bit muddy here and I'd like to create some separation. And as he's starting to chisel out some stuff, if it affects the kick drum or the guitars in an adverse way, I feel comfortable saying, I want to put that back in there. I'm willing to take a little muddiness in the low end to not change the overall sonic shape of the low end. And we work together well. And plus 9 times out of 10, I trust his judgment and I let him do it. But we have a dialogue, and he's also a brilliant guy, and he's done a lot of big records, like I said. And so I trust him. And we're in town, so if I take the mixes home the next day and I'm not crazy about it, I can come back in the next day and we can try some new thing, like we did on Sin and Bones. We actually redid some of the mastering things, and and it keeps me from having to fly back and forth to New York and sit in a lobby with it, if they even let me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I would say, find engineers that you trust, that you like, that you can tell them that they're wrong, because it's your record. It's not, at the end of the day, you're paying them to use their judgment, but it's your record, it's your name. If you disagree with what they're doing, you should find someone that you can tell no to, and then let them argue back. Have a discussion. Arguing's good as long as it's respectful.
Definitely.
Have a nice dialogue, because out of all of the best records ever made, there are great arguments and great stories behind it. Bring in people that you trust, that you can have those things. And in mastering, find that guy too, that you can have a discussion with and ask questions. If you're a student, don't just take something to a mastering guy and let him do it. I like being with Glenn because I can sit in a room and ask him, why did you do that? What was the purpose of it? And let him tell me, because I want to know. Like, that's the only way we learn. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the age-old thing where the girl says, well, I've had better. What? Why? Tell me why. You know what I mean? Because you'll never get better unless you ask questions. And music is just like sex. It's subjective. There's a partner for everybody, and there's a fan base for every band. I'll hear 9 bands out of 10 new bands I hear, I'm like, I squirm and squint, and stuff. And then there's the 10th band that kills me, and it's amazing. But those other 9 bands aren't bad. It's just that it just wasn't something that spoke to me. And there is a fan base for those other 9 bands. So there are no rights and wrongs. And like when people said, oh man, that Some Kind of Monster Metallica record sounded terrible. Like, I didn't like it, but there's a lot of people who did. And so ultimately, as a musician and as an artist, you have to answer to your fan base, because on some level, they're your boss. Because if they stop buying your records, then you're just an idiot sitting in a room strumming a guitar for nobody. So
I like that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have a responsibility to at least be humble enough to listen to what people say, and then you have to decide: do what they say have validity? Are you willing to be such a great artist that you don't care what they say? Or, you know what I mean? It's the same thing with reviewers, I feel really fortunate that Sin and Bones got a great list of reviews. I mean, I didn't see... The only reviews that I saw that people had any criticism was like, I wish it was more of this. But they couldn't pick it really pick it apart based on its own merits. They just, maybe they yearned for something out of their own palette.
Yeah, definitely.
And I love that, like, wow, that was great. It's the first review, set of album reviews that I've ever gotten where I didn't feel like I was getting beat up by 50% of the magazines, which is cool. But 50%, if you're getting beat up, I like to read those reviews because, one of them is going to tell you something that has there's some merits to that. But don't be afraid to take criticism, and know that don't take it personally, because it's just like movies or anything else. Just because someone doesn't like it doesn't mean it's not good. It just means that you don't have a fan in that person. But learn to be humble and know that you got to have freaking Kevlar on in this business. Because it's brutal. When I grew up in the business, there was no such thing as the internet the first few years. So if you had a review, it was in a magazine. Now anybody can tell you suck in 20 seconds. You know what I mean? And it's up there fast. So you got to be really you have to be able to. That's why I say find people that you surround yourself with that you really trust. Make records that you believe in. Because if you don't believe in it, then you'll crumble under criticism. You'll fold. If you believe in it in your heart, it's well recorded, it's well written, it's well produced, then if someone tells you it sucks, it doesn't matter. Because you, in your heart, just know that that's some dude living in his mom's basement just sport bitching because it's not the record they wanted. You know what I mean? Yeah. Make sure it's the record. Chris and I knew going into this record that this was the record we needed to make. And if there were people who criticized it, we were okay with it. Because we had the confidence moving forward that we made the best album of our career, and it was the record we wanted to make. So then that makes it okay.
You're a studio kind of junkie. I mean, you've been around in the industry long enough that you know all sorts of cool things about what happens in the studio. You're now the producer, the engineer, so except for on the drum tracks, and you mix it and get everything prepared, send it out for mastering. So that's a lot of hats besides songwriter, musician, everything else. How is it? How do you balance all this out?
It's a nightmare. I know what I do best. And I know my drummer and I have played together since the late 80s. We started Stuck Mojo together in 1989. We are truly joined at the hip as far as how we play. And I just decided we were going to make the record that best describes who we are as players and musicians, and not try to write outside the lines. It's like a lot of artists will, take the coloring book analogy, try to write outside the lines to push themselves. I didn't do that on this record. This is like, who are we? Who is Chris Jericho as a singer? Who is Rich Ward as a riff writer and as a melody writer? Who is Frank Fonseray? Who is Billy Gray? And who is Paul DeLeo? Who is Fozzy? Who are these five guys? And when they come together, what does that sound like? And I didn't worry if it sounded like Stuck Mojo at times. I didn't worry if it was melodic like the Duke. I didn't worry about any of that stuff. I just wanted to make the best representation of who we are when we're at our best. And I decided those are the records I'm going to make from now on. I'm no longer going to try to keep these albums sounding uniquely different, because it's cool to do that, and at the same time it sometimes can be hard to replicate live, because I pushed myself as a player to be uniquely different on this thing to the point that when live I'm like, wow, how did I play that? I'm like having to relearn how I actually played these parts and these bits, and that can be really cool and challenging because it can push you to become a better player. And at the same time, I know why Motorhead makes the same record over and over again, and why Slayer does it, and why AC/DC does it, and ZZ Top, and it's because that's who they are. And you can tell when these bands try to push outside their boundaries, and it's not a bad thing. I think all musicians should try to color outside the lines at times, but it should be the exception, not the rule. Because I think fans support bands who really know who they are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like the guy who walks into the bar and you like, why are all the girls talking to him? Because he's a fully realized dude. He knows who he is. He's not putting something on. It's not fake. He's not trying to pretend to be something that he's not. And that confidence is infectious. It has an attraction to it. And I believe that the reason that I still have a career today is because I've tried to maintain some sanity and tried not to chase the industry. When things have become popular, I didn't try to sprint to stand in line behind it, and
You didn't make a dubstep record.
right. I didn't try to do, when Stuck Mojo first started in the late 80s and early 90s, I didn't try to do a grunge record. We were doing rap, rock, metal before there was a genre. When Fozzy started, we were doing this kind of covers thing where we were doing Steel Panther before they were Steel Panther. We tried things that were unique and different, and we ran away from whatever was the soup du jour. And I like that,
Definitely. It's perfect. We're again Big Bryan, 8747 Productions. We're hanging out with Rich Ward, band Fozzy. They're out here on tour. Their album just came out. We've been taking a listen to it, and we love it. We think it's great. You got a killer sound out of that record, like you said. You have every right, and you should be able to brag about that and feel proud about it because it's definitely sonically awesome. If you guys haven't heard it, then you're missing out. You need to go check it out. But we'll catch up with you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see you then.
Thanks.